Old Dominion defensive tackle Alonzo Ford commits to Penn State out of the transfer portal, and everyone's thinking, okay, this is a boost for the defensive line, at least the interior anyway. But is it enough? I think so, but
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
welcome into another Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. And thanks so much for joining me as we're going to look at plenty of things today when it comes to Penn State football. Alonzo Ford, Dante Cephas announcing, well, at least tweeting out, "We are." So what does that mean for the defensive tackles, the interior defensive line, and then the wide receivers? Have they gotten enough out of the transfer portal? Plus Penn State basketball, everything's kind of settled when it comes to Micah Shrewsbury's players, at least former anyway, right? They are either in Happy Valley or they are over at Notre Dame or elsewhere. And then we're also going to hear from Ethan Hennessy, does a great job covering the Patriot League. We're going to get a player profile on Leo OBoyle, who comes over from Lafayette and joins Mike Rhodes and Penn State men's basketball. But first, we are starting with Alonzo Ford coming over from Old Dominion, defensive tackle for Penn State, now formerly, again, a Monarch. But this is a player that does have some intrigue behind him. He was sought after and a guy that Penn State desperately needs at this point, okay? Alonzo Ford comes in, you're looking at that background and okay, it's not a Power 5 conference. It's in the Sun Belt, right, with Old Dominion. Ricky Ronnie, right? So that pipeline helps a little bit. I don't know that Ricky Ronnie I turned over his player, if you will, to Penn State. I don't think it works that way. But Alonzo Ford comes to Penn State, and this is a good get for Penn State solely because Penn State needs depth still at defensive tackle. They need guys that can play in the interior because if you look at, some people are starting to catch on that Penn State has some of the best edge rushers in all of the country. So good that they are top 5. Yes, top 5. I'm talking defensive end strictly, and that's denied Dennis Sutton, Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaacs, Uriah Fisher, and so on and so forth, with the depth that Penn State has one of the top 5 units in all of the country. But when it comes to the defensive interior, when it comes to the defensive tackles, not so much. But Alonzo Ford does give you a boost. You get a veteran, right? You're getting somebody that has years of experience playing Division I college football. And then next you have somebody that just has a high motor. When you watch someone like Alonzo Ford, it was interesting, and I'm going to get to some points here about him as a player, that he'll stand out more than you might think. Like, he's not just a depth piece, but it certainly helps where Penn State kind of stands after the blue and white game, to see, at least in comfy clothes, right? Hakeem Beamon, not again. And you have Keziah Izzard as well. Those two guys in comfy clothes. Are they hurt? Were they just sitting out? We don't know. Penn State doesn't like to share that information. But that's not good if they're not going to be ready over the summer and then when West Virginia rolls around. So Alonzo Ford can come in and he can play. That's the most important part. He can play. It's just a matter of how well he can play. Well, when he was an honorable mention for the All Sun Belt team just a season ago. 3.5 tackles for loss. Now that's big because he is somebody, again, defensive tackles aren't normally going to make a lot of plays. Their job is to cause havoc. Their job is to eat double teams so that the edge rushers and the linebackers get all the fun. They get all the tackles, they get all the recognition, but essentially the defensive interior, this is more particular for a 3-4 defense. Penn State's going to run a 4-3, might even see some 3-4 because I thought Manny Diaz was experimenting with it a little bit in the blue and white game. Besides the point, but those defensive interior guys, they don't get all the glamour. They don't get all the glory because they do a lot of the dirty work. Their job is to take the center and the guard double teams and make plays. And that's something that Alonzo Ford did when he was at Old Dominion, is that he would take on double teams. He was more of a nose guard and still making plays, which is big. Because again, what I'm getting at is defensive tackles traditionally don't get to make all the high profile plays, but someone like Ford did. This is coming straight from his coach, his defensive coordinator. I have a quote. This comes from Blake Seiler, and he says, "I've coached D-line. I played D-line," and this was after the 2021 season, but for a true freshman to do what Ford did playing nose guard, I've never seen that before. That's very particular because when you play as a nose guard, he's going to move to a 3 technique, be a defensive tackle, so he's moving a little bit over, but someone who's over the center, you're not making plays. You are causing havoc. You are eating up the attention of those interior offensive linemen. But for someone like Ford to do what is described right there, that just tells me that he is an intelligent football player, that he's cerebral. So I'm excited for his addition, but defensive depth at a defensive tackle is still very limited. And that's the problem. A couple of freshmen aren't hurt here for Penn State. And I can't speculate, right? We just know from the blue and white game that Hakeem Beamon and Keziah Insard, they were in comfy clothes, right? That's all we can say about that here. But defensive tackle depth is limited, and Penn State, James Franklin, time and time again, whether it was January, February, March, April, we're here in May, they're still targeting defensive tackles. So Ford definitely helps. He provides another body. He's someone, again, that is talented. And again, he's not someone that's all that big, at least from other standards, right? Because for Penn State, what they want to do is they want to have defensive tackles that are agile, that can go 3 downs. That's the most important part. When it becomes a passing situation, you don't want to have to completely adjust your line and roll all these guys out. You want people that can play multiple downs, that can sustain drives. And that's what Alonzo Ford does. So at 6'3", 270 pounds, this is someone that fits in with what Penn State wants to do with this attacking 4-3 defense, and someone that I can see being a serious contributor once he gets settled in with the scheme of everything. So I like the move. He's not very big, but that is fine. Penn State does not need, they do not need a 350-pound nose guard. That is not going to win them football games because it's the type of defense that they run. Okay? That's all that has to do with. And PJ Mustipher was very good at it, and he was the biggest, being 320 pounds, right? He's more of a traditional 4-3, honestly, a 3-4 defensive end. I think that's where he's going to end up with the Denver Broncos. Again, separate thing, but they still need more help at the end of the day. I think that's what this boiled down to, is that if Hakeem Beamon and Keziah Insard, if they are dealing with serious ailments, maybe it was discipline. I can't speculate. I don't know. They didn't play in the blue and white game. That's what we do know. Alonzo Ford is a step in the right direction, but I can't say that it's necessarily enough. And then Dante Cephas is officially on campus, or at least Twitter indicates, right? You know, you tweet out the "we are," the semester's over for everybody for Penn State. Now the summer session has begun, and Dante Cephas seems to be in town. But better late than never, right? This is somebody that you would have liked to have on for, he's been verbally committed for quite some time. Penn State couldn't exactly promote him because he wasn't officially on campus. You could say that, you know, all the pundits and everybody and the reporters can say, yeah, Dante Cephas, so glad to have him, but James Franklin couldn't exactly name him, just saying, you know, we're getting that other one receiver. But that's what's interesting. Penn State had a receiver in Dante Cephas committed, and they still feel the need to go out and recruit others in the transfer portal. And that's pretty telling. Okay. What also is telling, and this is something that I've said on the show before, this is something that other people have said, Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace are the only ones that have gotten specific praise from the coaches. You ask some assistants, you ask some players, okay, you might have, you know, let's take an Amari Evans, for example, they'll get, but not specifically by James Franklin, where he says, you know, who have the best receivers been? He doesn't go through a litany of them. He doesn't have a list. It's Trey Wallace and it's Keandre Lambert-Smith. And it's been that way the entire offseason. So Dante Cephas is going to come in. He's going to play. He should be a starter. It's just a matter of developing chemistry. But now we have all of May, we have June, we have July, we have August. 4 months, hopefully a veteran wide receiver, someone who was an all-MAC conference selection first team, can make some chemistry with Drew Aller. That is the key. It's not about his talent. It's strictly about what will he do in the meantime with Drew Aller. And that's really what it boils down to. So, but Penn State's still looking for more wide receivers. We know that, offering various guys that have jumped in and out of the transfer portal. They've committed other places. But Penn State would you think that Malik McLean and Dante Cephas would have been enough, because I said it too. But clearly that's just not enough. So someone that does bring some intrigue here is Justin Brown, who was formerly a Penn State, at least a prospect that Penn State was very interested in. He was a former 3-star, and he went down to Mississippi State. He had Penn State in his top 3, committed to Mississippi State, the Bulldogs. May he rest in peace. Mike Leach. But I think that's why he is transferring out. Mike Leach passed away. That's the coaching staff he committed to. And now Justin Brown is in the transfer portal, and somebody that could commit to the Nittany Lions. Maybe could rethink that. Solid wide receiver, okay? But I don't know. Maybe he reconsiders. There's no speculation. He hasn't put out any interest or said who he's been contacted by. Just that he's in the transfer portal, met the deadline, April 30th. No one can go in and out anymore. They can make the announcement that the announcement came a little late for Brown, but there's no more hopping in and out of the transfer portal. Penn State's team is intact. There's only going to be more additions, no more subtractions. So you don't have to worry about any football players reconsidering. This is the squad. They're just going to add some more people. It is Locked On Nittany Lions, and we're talking Penn State men's basketball as we're going to welcome on Ethan Hennessy for the final segment to get a player profile for someone that was in the Patriot League, and that is Leo OBoyle, who's joining Penn State. Sharpshooter, to say the least. He can fling the basketball from anywhere outside the arc. And we're also going to talk about some of those former Micah Shrewsbury players, as Kebba Njie has made a decision. But before we move any further for Penn State men's basketball, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is right, $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Great promotions every day, a safe and secure app, plus you get paid instantly. There's no waiting, so there's no better place to bet playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Check out HappyValleyInsider.com. Again, Locked On Nittany Lions, now your go-to podcast for Penn State rivals. And Happy Valley Insider, affiliated with Penn State rivals, is your go-to source for everything Penn State athletics. So check it out today, HappyValleyInsider.com. Penn State men's basketball. Again, we're going to be talking Leo OBoyle with a special guest in the final segment, but Kebba Njie is moving on. He's going to Notre Dame. It is official. He's off to South Bend. And that's it for Micah Shrewsbury's former players, right? He had Evan Mahaffey go to Ohio State, Kanye Clary, Jameel Brown, Demetrius Lilly stay in Happy Valley. So think about that. 5 players, at least 5 active college players. Out of them, 60% stay with Penn State, with Mike Rhodes. So I think that's a win. Evan Mahaffey goes home to Ohio, and Kebba Njie, out of all 5 of them, right? He was the only one to go to Notre Dame. So I find that very intriguing. But this is the one, right? Micah Shrewsbury was able to retain all of his recruits. Braden, there's really nothing to debate here. And it's obviously not disrespectful. These conversations happened at the dinner table. There was no out recruiting Braden's father to play college basketball for the next, how many years, right? But Kerry Booth, someone who was a legacy, Calvin, of course, legacy at Penn State, one of the best basketball players in Nittany Lion history. And Kerry decides to follow Micah Shrewsbury. But we know when you talk to Calvin, when you listen to Dad, he says that he wants Kerry to be able to make his own decisions. He wants Kerry to make it to the NBA. And they felt that Micah Shrewsbury was the best option. So that's why they followed. And then Logan Imes, kind of the same thing from Indiana already. That those made sense. Kerry Booth does hurt a little bit, but all those recruits sticking with Micah Shrewsbury, it kind of does make sense here. from Kebba Njie's perspective, let's think about this. There's a lot of playing time to be had at Notre Dame with all the changing, coaching staff, of course, is one thing, but players are moving in and out of the transfer portal for the Fighting Irish. So Kebba Njie, I think, sees an opportunity. Unlike a lot of the other freshmen, aside from Kanye Clary had a substantial role as a true freshman. But from start to finish, Kebba Njie seemed to be the one that was always frequently getting the nod out of that group of freshmen in the first year. They were the ones that he was the one that was consistently getting onto the floor, increasing his minutes. The Big Ten tournament, I felt like he really took off, or at least you saw that development. And you were excited for year 2 of Kebba Njie. Well, Notre Dame fans can have that now, unfortunately. And there's going to be a lot of minutes for him. There's going to be a lot of playing time. There's going to be opportunities for him to get better. And probably he's going to get to go back to his number 4 spot. I think Micah Shrewsbury probably had that conversation with him about, rather than being forced into a 5 spot, you are now going to be your traditional 4. And that's what Kebba Njie is, bottom line. I do think Kebba Njie gave them a chance. He gave Mike Rhodes, he gave Penn State a chance, because Kebba Njie didn't immediately go into the transfer portal, right? He stuck around for a few days, and that probably done, maybe he didn't. Maybe he just said, you know what, I'm going to handle my classes and then figure it out from there. But I think he had conversations with Penn State first, gave him a chance, talked to the teammates, Jameel Brown, Kanye Clary, Demetrius Lilly, and that still wasn't enough. But good for him. He's going to go to Notre Dame. He's going to go to the Fighting Irish. Hopefully he doesn't succeed too much, right? But now Penn State's not done. They still have roster spots to fill out. And I think right now the front court is significantly better. At least the forwards, the wings, and down low, they are better. The backcourt could use some reinforcements. And Shamari Allen just might fit the bill. From the Kansas City Roos. Yes, that is right. University of Missouri, Kansas City. The Roos, 6'4", 200-pound guard, entered the transfer portal. And this is somebody, I'm talking Florida, Western Kentucky, UTEP, Mississippi State, UCF, NC State, Richmond, a bunch of other schools, about a fingers. Okay, I'm counting. And Penn State's just one of them. Shamari Allen fits in very well with this Penn State team if he's going to talk to Mike Rhodes and them. And he would actually play a significant amount of minutes. This is someone that a season before averaged close to 5 points a game. Okay, so why would Penn State be interested in somebody that only averaged 5 points a game for the Roos just a year before the last season? Well, then he jumped to 17 points per game. 5 rebounds per game, nearly 3 assists, 2 steals per game. So he's defensive minded. I really like that about him. But this is someone that can score from anywhere. He can shoot at 35% from 3-point line. He's a good shooter. He can drive to the basket. He's got a mid-range jumper. He can create his own shot, kind of like Ace Baldwin. You could use a lot more Ace Baldwins. Those guys are good at create. Kanye Clary's good at this too. They create their own shots. So anytime you can get a player that can create their own offense, they don't need to rely on other players. Of course, you want symmetrical team basketball. You want that chemistry. But at the same time, sometimes you just need someone who can take an ISO. And Shamari Allen at least showed that very much so. Now, Allen is an intriguing case because I like him for the Nittany Lions because I like the way that he's developed. He's actually got a really interesting story when it comes to his basketball career. 2 points per game. And he probably doesn't want me talking about this. 2 points per game, his senior season in high school. How is somebody getting Power 5 looks when he was averaging just 2 points his senior season in high school? Well, then he went to prep school. He didn't give up. Then he went to JUCO. Then he ended up with University of Missouri, Kansas City. And now he is looking at potentially being a starting or at least a serious contributor for a Power 5 conference team. That's incredible. That's hard work. That is determination. That is studying the game. Because also, if you notice, when he was with the Roos the year before, right, before he averaged 17 points, he was only averaging 5, and he was playing about roughly 22 minutes, 23 minutes. Then he jumped up to over 30 minutes a game, close to 35, and that average went from 5 to 17. That is a player that Penn State wants. I'd be really excited if they added him to the backcourt to go along with Jameel Brown, Kanye Clary, Ace Baldwin, another veteran. Hopefully they can get him, but they got a lot of teams that they're going up against. And we're going to learn about another player that is already with the Penn State Nittany Lions. That is Leo OBoyle. Ethan Hennessy is joining me to talk about his player profile in the next segment. It is Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode and joining me as a special guest to talk about the latest transfer portal commitment to Mike Rhoades and Penn State men's basketball. And that is Ethan Hennessy on the other side. College basketball journalist, everything you need to know for the Patriot League, which is why he's esteemed for this show, at least for this segment, because Leo OBoyle coming over from Lafayette. And Ethan, you saw him play quite a bit last season and what he's done, and of course over the years. But Ethan, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it. You're over at Happenin' Hoops on Twitter, and just before we're having this conversation, it was really great to get the understanding of what you want to do surrounding the Patriot League.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Zach. I've got a chance, in the brief time to kind of check out your stuff and, really comprehensive coverage about Penn State. And I think that's really cool for the fan base there. But yeah, for myself, I kind of started Happening Hoops a number of years ago when I was in college at Valparaiso, just because I loved college basketball. I'm originally from Maryland, and kind of when I moved back, I've been a lifelong Loyola Greyhounds fan. So I've luckily had the opportunity to kind of work a little bit in their athletic department doing stats for the program. But I cover college basketball specifically kind of with a focus on mid-majors and, ones particularly in the Northeast. But I've grown really passionate about the Patriot League and kind of have an aspiration to be the go-to source for Patriot League coverage. So I feel like that started towards the end of last year, and I'm looking to continue it into this upcoming year.
All right, so you're the perfect expert to have on for this. And Andrew Funk did this a year ago with Micah Shrewsbury, and now OBoyle does this with Mike Rhoades, coming to what seems to be at least every day, at least every week. The lineup gets a little bit bigger. The lineup gets a little bit better, metaphorically and literally and metaphorically, right? Mm-hmm. And now you add OBoyle into the equation, who is a great shooter, average double-digit points a season ago, and has gotten better each and every season, has 1 year of eligibility left. Ethan, why Penn State? Why does this move make sense for both OBoyle and Penn State?
Yeah, well, for OBoyle, for Penn State, first we'll start with, as you said, they had Andrew Funk there last year from Bucknell. And, potentially it looks like they might be establishing just a Patriot League pipeline of sharpshooters. I think that for Penn State, it makes sense. They add shooting. That's OBoyle's specialty. He's not like an incredibly athletic player. He doesn't do a whole lot superbly well aside from shooting, but he's just a marksman, particularly from three. And I think that, he's got some size too. He can rebound a little bit. I think it's going to be a good fit for Penn State and allow them to really space the ball on offense. I expect him to hit, probably 3 to 5 threes a game, maybe, if they can get him some space. Athletic. I had a chance to see him 3 times this year when Lafayette was playing Central Connecticut State down here in Baltimore, when he came to Loyola, and then I went up to Lafayette for the Patriot League semifinal game against American. And particularly in the last game, that I saw him there against American, he just looked really comfortable. And I do wonder a little bit how much kind of his skill set is going to translate, because obviously he played pretty well against Patriot League competition, but it is certainly a big step up when you're playing in the Big Ten. And I think that, while he was like the first or second option for Lafayette, he'll definitely be more of a role player for Penn State, but I think he can fit into that role, and I think he'll play it well.
Yeah, he was someone that shot over 40% from three, averaged over 11 points per game a season ago. But as you mentioned, I guess not necessarily your jack of all trades, more of your hyper focus to one particular skill, and that's 3-point shooting. And that's something that, okay, yes, Penn State had Andrew Funk come in like this, but they had really only Seth Lundy as the other option. And so now this combination of Zach Hicks from Temple, so the eastern side of Pennsylvania, now that's where they're recruiting 3-point shooters from. And then you have Leo OBoyle come into the fold as well, because I thought, okay, if Penn State's going to add another wing type of player, I didn't think they'd be able to secure this just because they have so many options. But because he's just so talented when it comes to the marksmanship, as you said, the 3-point shooting, that he is going to see a good amount of playing time. It's going to be in a role type of case, because what do you expect out of him at Penn State? Is he going to get 10 points a game? Is it going to be, maybe 5 or 6? He'll hit a couple of clutch threes, and then other nights he might go off for potentially 20, like he did. Again, he did this at Lafayette. He had some really good games down the stretch at the end of last season.
Yeah. Just what you said there, Zach. He has the ability to go off and score in bunches. I was kind of going back and looking at, his stats for the past season or two, and he's a streaky scorer. So he'll have some games where he'll score, 18, 20, 22, and then other games where, it's 6, 7, 9 points, really seemingly without any rhyme or reason. Because I was even looking, it doesn't really matter if it's a high major opponent or a mid-major opponent at home or on the road. He just kind of goes up and down. And so I anticipate that'll be the case at Penn State too. I could see him having a couple breakout games in conference play, and folks maybe from other fan bases being surprised, who is this Leo OBoyle that, just dropped 17 on us. But he'll probably also have a couple games where, he's just not hitting and it's below average scoring. As we talked about a little bit earlier, there's not a whole lot to contribute elsewise. He can put the ball, on the floor and drive it a little bit. He can rebound a little, but he's not a great passer. But being a grad transfer, he's been around college basketball for a while. And obviously, in college basketball these days, coaching staffs are wanting to get old and stay old. So that proves a benefit as well.
Yeah, Penn State's team, at least for this season, is going to have a lot of veterans. I mean, they do have some of the returners coming back, the guys that stayed from Micah Shrewsbury's class, be it a Kanye Clary or a Jameel Brown. But a lot of these guys are juniors, seniors with 1 to 2 years of eligibility left. So ultimately, what would you say is your prediction for a stat line on a night-to-night, day-to-day basis for OBoyle when he's in blue and white?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say, probably, maybe like 12 points, maybe 3 threes, probably 2 or 3 rebounds, a couple of assists. I'd say that would be probably an average stat line for Leo OBoyle in a Penn State uniform.
Does he project as someone that can be in the starting 5, or is he a 6th or 7th man off the bench?
That's a good question. I would have to say it maybe, depends on the rest of the roster. I'm not sure. I personally am not really an expert in Penn State as much as you are, obviously, so I don't know the rest of the roster, but I would say somewhere in that, like, if I had to take a guess, maybe 6th or 7th. Yeah. All
right. No, fair to say, because I look at, that's what I mean. I looked at that lineup and I'm thinking, okay, this is great that you get the reinforcements. The more guys you have, the better equipped you're going to be for Big Ten basketball. But I thought about it, Ethan, and I said, well, they already have the one guy. I guess you can never have too many shooters, right? Because you had Zach Hicks from Temple, and I thought that Penn State, just with the way that they were going and building the wings, the forwards, getting a Nick Kern from VCU and all the other guys. I mean, they have a really balanced lineup. So OBoyle definitely adds that added extra dimension that you can't just worry about Zach Hicks anymore on the perimeter. You also have to worry about OBoyle and what happens when they're both on the floor, right, at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ethan, I really appreciate the time. I'm glad we got this perspective. Again, you're the Patriot League expert. Everything that you do, again, just share with everyone what you do personally and where they can find your work, because you do an incredible job and you are the go-to source when it comes to Patriot League, which is where OBoyle's coming from at Lafayette.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. So, people can find me, happeninghoops.com is where I write kind of, my game recap articles. And I also do CBI bracketology come March. I'm at Happening Hoops on Twitter, and then the Happening Hoops YouTube channel. And this offseason, I'm actually interviewing all 5 of the new Patriot League head coaches at each of their respective programs. So my interview with John Griffin is already out, and I'll have the other ones coming up soon. But thank you, Zach. I really appreciate you for having me on the podcast today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, Ethan, that you were able to share some perspective about a new Penn State Nittany Lion. Thanks. Once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, more is coming up on the show. We're going to talk extensively about footballs. The win total's out for Penn State. Can they get over 9.5? The betting markets have it shaded that way, and we'll see which games are a toss-up. And then the whiteout debate. Should be Michigan, but I don't know. I can't say. I know who it's going to be. The next episode, I'm going to tell you who it is and why Penn State is picking them, kind of like the way they did with Minnesota last year. So that's going to all be discussed and more. Of course, check out Happy Valley Insider, Penn State Rivals, happyvalleyinsider.com, your go-to place for everything Penn State athletics, and Locked On Nittany Lions, now your go-to podcast for Penn State Rivals. Thanks so much for joining me on another episode. I will talk to you later.